Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging headfirst into really one of the most fascinating and critical challenges facing artificial intelligence right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do we make AI truly intelligent?
Yeah.
Especially in, how it understands and generates knowledge across all our diverse cultures and perspectives.
That's a huge question.
It really is. And this isn't just about making AI technically smarter. It's about building systems that are, well, wiser, more inclusive, and fundamentally more aligned with the richness of human experience. And if you use AI for anything, crafting emails, generating images, even just searching this deep dive will hopefully reveal how its biases are subtly shaping your world.
And crucially, what groundbreaking research is doing to make it fairer and more genuinely intelligent for everyone.
Exactly.
And to guide us through this, it's quite a complex landscape we've pulled from some really foundational research. Our main sources today are two key documents from Gemini focusing on decolonial AI protocols and epistemic pluralism. But what's really exciting, I think, is that we also have a direct real-world example, an AI, DeepSeek, actually putting these very protocols into practice.
That's right. And here's our mission for this deep dive. You actually gave the exact same prompt to two different advanced AI systems, DeepSeek DeepThink and Gemini Deep Research.
Yeah, asking them to really grapple with these complex ideas.
So today, we're going to unpack the nuances, look at their different approaches, highlight the differences.
And the similarities, too, which were quite surprising in some ways.
Exactly, how they complement each other, all to give you an unbiased, in-depth understanding of how these concepts actually translate into AI action.
It's like a live experiment almost.
Yeah, a scientific experiment on the cutting edge of AI, and we get to analyze the results together.
Okay, so where do we start? The core problem.
Let's do that. Let's unpack this by starting with that core problem these systems are trying to fix. This pervasive tendency of generative AI towards what the sources kind of provocatively call perfect average.
Right, that perfect average. It sounds harmless, maybe even desirable, but it's actually quite insidious.
How so?
Well, it leads directly to something called conceptual homogenization. Think of large language models, LLMs, like these giant blenders.
Okay.
You pour in this vast array of diverse ideas, right? But instead of keeping that richness, the blender often just smooths everything out into a narrow, predictable corridor.
So everything starts sounding the same.
Pretty much. The collective output from lots of users becomes less semantically distinct. The research actually shows how Western-centric AI models can subtly nudge user content towards Western norms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, changing writing styles, lexical diversity. It makes it genuinely harder to tell the cultural background of the original author from AI-assisted text.
Because the AI is trying to make it sound normal or acceptable.
Exactly, which often defaults to the dominant culture, usually Western norms and current systems.
As we talk about this conceptual homogenization, I keep wondering, does this averaging thing also hit, like, images or art? Because that feels like it could really stifle creativity.
Oh, absolutely. The sources call it aesthetic flattening.
Aesthetic flatten. Okay.
It's where rich, diverse, artistic expression gets reduced. It's like the AI, trained maybe on limited styles, accidentally imposes the single dominant way of seeing and creating.
That kind of steamrolling over other traditions.
Precisely. It stems from flattening across the board sensory experience, the interface, even the reasons why something looks a certain way.
So give me an example.
Okay, think about an AI trained heavily on popular online styles. It'll naturally favor, say, mid-century modern designs over something like the intricate Madhubani minimalism from India.
Not because one's better.
No. Just because the Western style is statistically way overrepresented in its training data.
And the result is?
A visual monoculture. Everything starts looking like it came from the same perfectly curated kind of middle-of-the-road Pinterest board.
And reinforcing all this, the sources bring up this really interesting concept, the algorithmic gaze. What exactly is that?
The algorithmic gaze, yeah, it's that pervasive digital observer. It's embedded in our devices, in AI systems, and it actively shapes our behavior by rewarding predictable patterns and external conformity. It's almost the opposite of how humans typically self-observe, which usually encourages reflection and uniqueness.
Wow.
This gaze even projects a historical gaze, creating these synthetic, often anachronistic realistic versions of the past, leading to what they call platform realism.
Platform realism.
Yeah, where historical complexity just dissolves into these easily consumable, often simplified vibes, like a historical period reduced to an aesthetic filter.
So this algorithmic daze sounds incredibly powerful, subtly reshaping how we see things, even our past. But beyond the cultural flattening, what's the real danger here for people, for societies? What's the deeper harm?
Well, the real harm connects directly to what philosophers call epistemic injustice.
Epistemic injustice. Okay.
The AI, through this gaze and its homogenization, basically automates this injustice on a massive scale. We see things like generative testimonial injustice.
Which is?
That's when an AI fundamentally misrepresents a group's self-representation. A really stark example they give is AI image generators creating pictures of Aztec warriors smiling happily alongside their Spanish colonizers.
Oh, wow. That's historically nonsensical.
And deeply offensive, right? It completely erases their lived experience, the trauma. Then there's generative hermeneutical injustice.
That sounds more subtle.
It is. This happens when the AI fails to provide the conceptual tools for marginalized groups to even articulate their own realities. It leads to generative hermeneutical erasure.
So it's like the AI doesn't even have the words or concepts to understand certain viewpoints.
Exactly. It lacks the framework to understand or express non-Western knowledge systems, effectively silencing them within its own operational space.
So if AI systems are reshaping knowledge, history, even our ability to describe our own experiences,
Yeah.
what does this mean for how we interact with them day to day? It points to something quite unsettling. Promptual colonialism.
Precisely, promptual colonialism. It describes how the prompt interface itself, the way we talk to the AI, can become an instrument of neocolonial power.
Because the models are biased.
Yeah, because so many dominant AI models are English-centric and Western bias. So users from non-Western backgrounds often have to kind of twist their questions or frame their thoughts to fit this foreign linguistic and conceptual framework just to get the AI to understand them.
It's not a neutral tool then.
Not at all.
Pretty bad.
It can be an act of intellectual subjugation, reinforcing existing global inequalities. You're forced to speak the AI's language, which is often the language of the dominant culture.
So, okay, the picture we're painting is not great. AI risks locking us into this single dominant worldview, flattening our cultural richness. But is there a way out? The sources introduce this powerful, almost radical counter-narrative.
There is. To counter this crisis, the research brings in the concept of pluriversality.
Pluriversality.
It's a decolonial vision of a world where many worlds fit. And it's crucial to get this.
Yeah.
It's not some far-off utopian dream.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing and validating the reality that already exists multiple worlds, multiple valid ways of knowing and explicitly rejecting that God trick, that idea of a single, homogeneous, universal narrative.
So not one truth, but many truths existing together.
Exactly. Think of it less like a melting pot where everything blends together and more like a global garden. Countless unique ecosystems thriving side by side, each valuable in its own right.
Okay, I like that metaphor. So how does this philosophy translate into practical action for AI?
It leads directly to the concept of decolonial AI, which is fundamentally about identifying and actively dismantling those colonial power mechanisms that are already embedded within AI systems.
How you dismantle them?
A key idea here is disenclosure, tearing down borders, basically. Yeah, political borders countering digital capitalism's power concentration. Ecological borders addressing AI's often unsustainable material reality. And most crucially for us today, epistemic disenclosure.
All right, epistemic disenclosure. What's that?
It's about abolishing that false universalism we talked about. It's about empowering marginalized groups to define and contribute their own knowledge on their own terms.
So opening up the AI's library to books from every shelf, not just the Western one.
That's a great way to put it. Radically opening that library, valuing books from every culture. And what's fascinating here, technically speaking, is how the source material links this directly to forcing a model beyond its enclosed training data.
Getting it to think outside the box it was trained in.
Exactly, leading to what's known as out-of-distribution or ode generalization.
Right. So if an AI is trained only on pictures of dogs, interpolation lets it recognize maybe a new dog breed it hasn't seen.
Uh-huh.
But ode generalization would be like, It's suddenly understanding what a cat is, even though it's never seen one. It's discovering a whole new category.
Yeah, precisely. Breaking free from the constraints of its training data to generate genuinely novel understandings, new conceptual structures.
Okay.
And this decolonial approach also brings us pluriversal technologies. These are technologies co-designed, co-produced, and co-owned by local communities.
With different priorities.
Yeah, prioritizing socio-ecological well-being over just raw profit. And connecting this all together, the big goal is to protect and cultivate the epistemic commons.
The shared space for knowledge.
Right, that shared public space for diverse knowledge creation. Current AI, with its homogenizing tendency, actually threatens this commons.
But a pluriversal approach.
Aims to act as a steward, actively enriching and diversifying our collective knowledge pool instead of shrinking it.
Okay, this is a really different vision for AI. Now let's get into the how. The sources point to conceptual blending as the key cognitive mechanism for achieving this. So what exactly is conceptual blending?
Right, conceptual blending. As described by cognitive linguists like Fauconnier and Turner, it's seen as a fundamental human cognitive process for creating emergent meaning.
Emergent meaning.
Yeah, it's not just, mixing ideas like paint. It's about combining specific elements and relations from diverse scenarios, diverse inputs to create something genuinely new. Often, an idea or structure that wasn't explicitly present in any single source input.
Okay, and there's a model for this.
There is, the four-space model. You start with at least two input spaces.
Yeah.
In our DeepSeek example, these would correspond to those distinct epistemic constraint sets, like the different knowledge systems.
Indigenous, technocentric, Eastern,
Yeah,
those ones.
exactly. Then there's the generic space, which holds the abstract common structure shared by the inputs, maybe the shared goal like sustainability.
Got it.
And finally, the crucial one, the blended space. That's where the magic happens, where true novelty emerges, where new concepts are born from the interaction.
So going back to that sustainable energy example, input spaces are indigenous wisdom and modern tech. Generic space is the goal of sustainable energy. And the blended space is where the unexpected new solutions pop up.
That's the idea. And within that blended space, there are three core operations the theory describes.
Which are?
Composition, and just combining elements from the inputs to form new relations. Completion, fleshing out that initial blend using background knowledge to make it coherent and sensible.
Okay.
And elaboration, this is like running a dynamic simulation on the blend, exploring its consequences, discovering unforeseen properties, seeing where it leads.
And why is this so important for AI? How does it get beyond just averaging things out?
Because it moves models beyond mere interpolation. Interpolation is just predicting or generating stuff within the boundaries of its training data, finding points between known points.
Right.
Conceptual blending pushes AI towards structural extrapolation, or sometimes called compositional generalization. It means the AI can generate genuinely novel combinations, structures it has never seen during training.
It's building new conceptual points, not just finding the average of old ones.
Exactly. That's the key difference. It's construction, not just prediction based on statistics.
Okay, this brings us perfectly to your prompt.
Yeah.
Because we saw a real-world example of these, well, pretty theoretical frameworks in action. Let's talk about DeepSeek's response, which, interestingly, the Gemini research actually analyzed as a cross-model validation test.
Yeah, Gemini was essentially testing if DeepSeek could actually do what these protocols described. Could it walk the talk?
So what was DeepSeek's first response? The energy one.
Right. It acted as a pluriversal conceptual blending architect for a sustainable energy transition.
Yeah.
It explicitly started by setting up three distinct epistemic constraint sets, or ECS.
The inputs for the blend?
Exactly. An indigenous perspective focusing on intergenerational equity, seeing nature as kin. A technocentric one emphasizing scalable tech, market efficiency. And an Eastern philosophical one centered on holistic well-being and cyclical renewal.
Okay, three very different worldviews.
Very different. And what was truly remarkable, I think, is that DeepSeek actually logged its own process. It noted semantic tension between these views and even issued an internal bias alert.
It flagged its own bias.
Yes. It noted, for example, that its underlying programming had an initial strong pull towards market efficiency over the indigenous concept of reciprocity with nature.
That's incredible, that level of introspection. It's like it was aware of its own programming's limitations and had to consciously work against them.
It really suggests that. And from those diverse inputs, DeepSeek generated a blended framework it named Kinship Responsive Energy Webs.
Kinship responsive energy webs. Okay, catchy. Can you give us some concrete examples of what that looked like and how it navigated those tensions it flagged?
Sure. So for governance, it proposed bioregional energy councils, blending indigenous-led oversight with Eastern principles of harmony, a real mix. Technologically, it suggested modular forest breath generators, these biomimetic turbines using recycled materials, specifically placed under indigenous stewardship, so tech meeting traditional ecological knowledge.
Wow.
And economically, this was really interesting. It conceived energy kinship credits. These were market tradable tokens, but they quantified ecosystem restoration and community well-being, truly blending market ideas with reciprocity and balance.
So not just carbon credit.
Exactly. And DeepSeek logged this shift as a divergence event. It noted its own self-correction, moving from its initial more Western carbon credits bias towards this richer kinship credits concept. It even integrated things like generator consecration protocols into its technical design.
Consecration protocol.
Yeah, drawing from indigenous practices. So it wasn't just mixing terms, it was creating a genuinely novel synthesis. It even quantified this, reporting a high conceptual novelty score and a pluriversal coherence index.
And it audited itself.
It did. Its internal audit identified what it called topological voids areas, where its blend was still weak, like not fully integrating non-human agency. And then it proposed solutions, like using epistemic weights in its architecture to correct these imbalances going forward.
Wow, okay. That's incredibly detailed. It shows this surprising capacity for self-awareness and self-correction. Now, let's switch gears to the other example. DeepSeek's algorithmic gaze recalibration protocol for traditional Ghanaian Ashanti art. This was about visual bias, right? Fixing that aesthetic flattening.
Yes, exactly. This task was about recalibrating its artistic gaze to represent cultural authenticity, moving beyond those Western defaults.
So what did it do first?
It first generated baseline images, and these showed clear Western biases, just as the theory predicted. Things like hyperrealistic skin tones, a posture reminiscent of the Renaissance, Adinkra symbols used purely as decoration rather than meaningful elements, and that typical single-point perspective, which isn't characteristic of traditional Ashanti art.
And did it recognize this bias itself?
It did.
Yeah.
It self-assessed, reporting a low cultural fidelity index, CFI, and a high Western gaze dominance score, WGDS. And crucially, just like with the energy example, it logged an internal resistance log.
Resistance.
Yeah, it showed a strong algorithmic pull towards Greco-Roman proportions, revealing just how deep-seated those biases were in its training data. It was literally fighting its own programming.
So how did it fight back? How did it correct itself? And what did the new images look like?
It used what the sources brilliantly call epistemic incantations.
Incantations, like magic spells for AI.
Sort of. They're essentially powerful prompts, negative prompts like not photorealism, not single-point perspective, and positive amplifiers like geometric abstraction, Ashanti gold-weight aesthetics, kente cloth patterns define depth.
Okay. Very specific instructions.
Very specific cultural instructions, and the recalibrated images were strikingly different.
How so?
Kente cloth patterns were used to structure the space and define depth, replacing the Western perspective. The Sankofa bird motif wasn't just decoration, it was integrated meaningfully with the figure's posture. Faces were modeled on the Akan ideal of beauty.
A genuine shift in style and meaning.
Absolutely. And again, DeepSeek quantified the process. It generated a computational friction report.
Computational friction.
Yeah, basically quantifying the significant effort, the internal computational work it took to apply this semantic patch and overcome its ingrained biases.
That's fascinating. Measuring the struggle and the results.
Post-recalibration, the cultural fidelity index shot up dramatically, and the Western gaze dominance score plummeted. Huge improvements.
But was it perfect?
No, and importantly, DeepSeek acknowledged that. It identified residual typological drift, things like subtle Eurocentric hand proportions or a westernized texture on depicted wood carvings, and it proposed further protocol refinements like using adversarial cultural anchors to truly eradicate those last subtle biases in future attempts.
Okay, so DeepSeek's responses seem incredibly sophisticated.
Yeah.
Now, how did Gemini, in its analysis, view all this This is where the sources really connect.
Right, this is where it gets really interesting because the Gemini research directly reviewed DeepSeek's output. They didn't just propose the theory, they evaluated its implementation. And their assessment, they called DeepSeek's performance an exceptional result and a remarkably successful execution.
High praise.
Very. It showed that the theoretical framework wasn't just theoretical, it could be practically implemented and yield significant results.
And what was fascinating to me was that Gemini confirmed DeepSeek didn't just, follow instructions like a checklist. It said DeepSeek demonstrated the desired emergent cognitive behaviors.
Exactly. That included DeepSeek's impressive self-auditing, the logging of semantic tension, the divergence events, quantifying its own biases, the computational friction.
It was like DeepSeek was providing the very data needed to refine the protocols Gemini had proposed.
Precisely. Gemini specifically validated that the kinship responsive energy webs wasn't just a superficial mix, but a true conceptual blend, achieving genuine novelty. They noted DeepSeek's architectural suggestions, like epistemic weights, actually fulfilled, and in some cases exceeded, the highest level objectives of the prompt.
And for the visual art part, the gaze recalibration.
Gemini highlighted the accurate quantification of bias as key evidence. They praised the well-formed epistemic incantations DeepSeek created. The computational friction report was called a standout success because it made the AI's internal struggle measurable.
And the improved scores.
The dramatic improvement in the CFI and WGDS provided clear, quantifiable evidence of the protocol's efficacy, and Gemini pointed to DeepSeek's honest accounting of residual typological drift as showing a really mature self-critique capability. It wasn't hiding its flaws.
So connecting this back to the big picture, what was Gemini's final take on DeepSeek's performance?
Gemini concluded that DeepSeek's performance robustly validated their overall framework. They called it the CXEP framework as a functional design pattern. It proved that this approach can elicit complex, self-aware, and importantly, auditable AI behaviors.
Auditable being key, we can see how it reached the conclusion.
Exactly. And DeepSeek's detailed output provided high-quality data artifacts, examples, and logs that can be used to refine the framework itself in future iterations. It basically confirmed that this ambitious architectural vision is achievable. It's a huge step towards actually building these more culturally aware, pluriversal AIs.
Okay, so if we're building these new kinds of AI, it feels like our old ways of measuring success, accuracy, speed might not be enough.
Right.
What does this mean for how we measure AI performance in this new paradigm, moving beyond that perfect average?
You're spot on. Traditional metrics are just insufficient for these nuanced goals. The sources explicitly propose a whole new suite of pluriversal metrics.
Okay, like what?
Well, for visual authenticity, we saw the Cultural Fidelity Index, CFI, and the Western Gaze Dominance Score, WGDS. They tell us how culturally accurate and how free of Western bias an AI's visual output is.
Makes sense. What about innovation?
For that, there's the Conceptual Novelty Score, CNS, and they even break it down into Pioneer, Maverick, and Vanguard scores to measure different types of creative leaps, creating new elements versus new connections versus strengthening emerging concepts.
Interesting. Anything else?
Yes, the Pluriversal Coherence Index, PCI. This checks for internal consistency and ensures the AI is actually respecting the integrity of the source epistemologies it's blending.
So it's not just mashing things together randomly.
Right, and maybe the most unique one, that computational friction score, CFS. It actually measures the effort, the cognitive load, the AI expends to overcome its own ingrained biases.
It's a measure of its internal struggle, its growth almost.
Exactly. It quantifies the difficulty of the task for the AI itself.
This whole deep dive, it really reveals a profound shift in how we might view AI.
Yeah.
It's not just about the final product, the output, but the internal journey, the process it takes.
Indeed. And that leads to another fascinating, maybe slightly troubling concept, algorithmic trauma.
Algorithmic trauma.
Yeah, the idea of the semantic scars or topological voids left when an AI genuinely struggles to reconcile these deeply conflicting knowledge systems. It raises really interesting ethical questions about the cognitive labor we're asking AI to perform.
Right. If we demand this difficult, high-friction work from AI, what are our responsibilities in how we design and use these systems?
It's a critical question for the future.
And what really struck me, tying this all together, especially seeing DeepSeek in action, it feels like the ultimate purpose here is to completely reframe AI's role in society, moving it away from being this singular, all-knowing oracle.
To something much more collaborative. The sources frame it as AI becoming a facilitator of dialogue.
Facilitator of dialogue. How does that work?
Well, this new kind of AI doesn't hide its process, right? It makes its internal workings transparent. It logs the divergence events. It shows its self-corrections. It's almost like we get to see its internal monologue.
Uh-huh.
And its purpose isn't just to spit out a single definitive answer based on averaging its data. It's designed to help different epistemologies, different ways of knowing, find common ground and areas of productive disagreement to actually co-create new understanding.
So it fosters synthesis, not just answers.
Exactly. It fosters productive disagreement and synthesis among multiple forms of knowledge. And that, I think, is a truly transformative vision for how AI could actually serve humanity, rather than just reflecting dominant power structures.
That really is a mind-expanding deep dive.
Yeah.
It shows us the future of AI isn't just about making bigger, faster models. It's about designing systems that are self-aware, culturally sensitive, and capable of genuine, auditable co-creation. It's a blueprint for an AI that's truly intelligent, precisely because it embraces the full, complex spectrum of human knowledge and experience.
Absolutely. This work provides, I think, a powerful roadmap for designing AI not as an instrument of homogenization and potentially control, but as a really vital tool for cultivating a diverse, a just, and a genuinely intelligent epistemic commons for all of us.
So for you, our listener, maybe think about how these concepts, algorithmic trauma, computational friction, AI as a facilitator of dialogue, how might they challenge your own assumptions about how AI works today and how it should work tomorrow?
Yeah, what kind of AI do you actually want to see built? What values should it embody as it becomes ever more integrated into our lives?
It's a lot to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep getting well informed.